The dishonoring the crystalline courts of the Valeran Empire gleamed under the triple moons, their translucent walls casting prismatic shadows across the gathering crowd. Commander Zareth stood in chains at the center of the vast amphitheater, her silver-scaled skin reflecting the ceremonial flames that burned in hovering braziers. The weight of 1,000 eyes pressed down upon her, but she kept her spine straight. Her violet eyes focused on the distant horizon visible through the court's transparent ceiling. "Commander Zareth of the 7th Legion," the High Arbiter's voice boomed across the silent assembly, amplified by acoustic crystals embedded in the walls. "You stand accused of the gravest transgression against our sacred warrior code. During the Burning Moon campaign, you deliberately disobeyed direct orders from the War Council." Zareth remained silent. She had already spoken her piece during the preliminary hearings. There was nothing left to say that would change their minds. The High Arbiter continued, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he paced before her. "When ordered to execute the cleansing protocol on the civilian settlement of Kafara III, you refused. You allowed 300 enemy non-combatants to escape, including their offspring. This act of weakness has brought shame upon the entire 7th Legion." A ripple of disgust passed through the assembled warriors. The Valeran prided themselves on absolute obedience to the warrior code. Mercy toward enemies was not just weakness, it was heresy. "The evidence has been examined," the High Arbiter declared. "The testimony has been heard. The War Council has reached its verdict." He paused, letting the silence stretch until it became almost unbearable. "Guilty." The word echoed through the crystalline chamber like a death knell. Zareth closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. She had known this would be the outcome from the moment she'd given the order to stand down. "For your crimes against the Empire and your betrayal of the warrior's oath, the punishment is total disgrace. You will be stripped of rank, honor, and name. Your lineage will be severed, your blade will be broken, and you will be cast into the crimson expanse to die forgotten and alone." The ceremonial guards approached, their movements perfectly synchronized. They began with her armor, the magnificent suit of living metal that had been grown specifically for her body, upon her ascension to commander. Each piece was removed with deliberate slowness, the bio-neural connections severing with audible snaps that made her nerve endings burn. The chest plate came first, then the gauntlets, the leg guards, and finally the helm that bore the crest of her now former house. Next came the braids. Zareth's mane of midnight blue hair had been woven into 13 intricate braids, each representing a major victory in her military career. The eldest warrior of the court approached with the ceremonial shears, ancient tools said to be forged from the fang of the first dragon. One by one he cut through each braid, letting them fall to the polished floor like severed limbs. With each cut, another piece of her identity was stripped away. The crowd watched in hungry silence as her hair was shorn close to her scalp, leaving only short, uneven stubble. In Valeran culture, a warrior's hair was their history, their pride. To be shorn was to be erased. "Bring forth Star Whisper," the High Arbiter commanded. 2 guards approached carrying an ornate case. Inside lay Zareth's ancestral blade, a sword that had been passed down through her bloodline for 700 years. The curved blade seemed to sing softly in the crystalline chamber, its surface rippling with patterns that looked like captured starlight. The hilt was wrapped in leather from the first hunt of each generation of her family, the pommel adorned with a crystal that contained a fragment of their homeworld's core. "Zareth the Disgraced," the High Arbiter intoned. "You are unworthy to bear this noble weapon. As you have broken your oath, so shall your blade be broken." The executioner stepped forward, a massive Valeran whose own blade was said to be able to cut through the fabric of space itself. He raised his weapon high above his head. Zareth watched, her jaw clenched so tightly she could taste blood as he brought it down. The sound of Star Whisper breaking was like the universe screaming. The ancient metal split with a crystalline shriek that reverberated through the chamber and into Zareth's very soul. The blade shattered into 3 pieces, the crystal in the pommel cracking and going dark. The fragments were carefully collected and placed in a vault, to be displayed as a warning to future generations. "You are no longer Zareth," the High Arbiter proclaimed. "You are nothing, nameless, honorless, cast out." The guards grabbed her arms and began marching her toward the transport that would take her to the edge of the crimson expanse. As they passed through the crowd, warriors she had served with, fought alongside, and even saved in battle, turned their backs on her. The ultimate gesture of contempt in Velryn society, the transport flew for hours, carrying her deeper into the wasteland that bordered the Empire. The crimson expanse was a desert of rust-colored sand and jagged rock formations, where the very air was toxic to most life forms. The temperature during the day could boil blood, while the nights were cold enough to freeze it. No water, no shelter, no hope. They didn't even slow down when they pushed her out. Zareth hit the sand hard, rolling several times before coming to a stop. The transport was already disappearing over the horizon by the time she pushed herself to her feet. She was wearing only the thin prisoner's garment they had given her, a single piece of fabric that would last perhaps 2 days in the harsh environment. The first night almost killed her. Without her armor's environmental controls, her body struggled to regulate its temperature. The Velryn were adapted to a much more temperate climate, and the extreme cold of the desert night sent her into near hypothermic shock. She survived by burying herself in the sand, using her own body heat to create a pocket of warmth. By the third day, her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her scales, once lustrous silver, had begun to dull and flake. The toxic air burned her lungs with every breath. She had found no water, only the false promise of ancient dried lake beds. It was on the 5th day that she saw the smoke. At first, she thought it was another hallucination. The heat mirages in the crimson expanse could play cruel tricks on a dying mind. But as she crested a ridge of blood-colored stone, she saw the source. A crashed vessel, half buried in a sand dune, smoke still rising from its engines. As she approached, she could make out the design. It wasn't Velryn. The hull was too blocky, too utilitarian. The script on the side was in characters she couldn't read, but she recognized the configuration. Human. The war between the Velryn Empire and the Human Coalition had been raging for 3 years. It was during a battle with human forces that she had committed her unforgivable sin, sparing their civilians when ordered to execute them. And now, here was one of their vessels, crashed in the same wasteland where she had been sent to die. She almost turned away. What was the point? But curiosity, or perhaps desperation, drove her forward. The airlock was damaged but not destroyed. She managed to force it open and slip inside. The interior was dark, emergency lighting casting everything in a red glow that reminded her uncomfortably of the desert outside. She could hear something, breathing, labored and wet. Following the sound, she found him in the cockpit, a human male strapped into the pilot's seat, blood seeping from a gash on his forehead. His flight suit was torn, revealing more injuries beneath. He was conscious, barely, his brown eyes tracking her movement as she entered. "Well," he wheezed in accented Velryn. "This is ironic. Saved from dying alone in the desert only to be killed by the enemy." Zareth stared at him. He was right. She should kill him. Even disgraced and exiled, she was still Velryn. He was still the enemy. But looking at him broken and dying, she saw not an enemy pilot, but another soul cast into this hellish wasteland to die forgotten. "I have no weapon," she said finally, "and no name. I am no one's enemy now." The human studied her with those strange single-pupil eyes. "Marcus Chen," he said after a moment. "Lieutenant 3rd Reconnaissance Wing. Or I was before." He gestured weakly at the wreckage around them. "Why are you here?" Zareth asked. "This is forbidden space." "Reconnaissance mission." Marcus coughed, specks of blood hitting his lips. "Trying to map your supply lines. Ran into an automated defense grid, lucky me." Zareth looked around the cockpit. There were supplies here, water, food, medical equipment, things that could keep them both alive a little longer. She had a choice to make. "Can you walk?" she asked. Marcus blinked in surprise. "With help, maybe. Why?" Because we're both going to die out here, Zareth said. But perhaps we don't have to die today. She helped him unstrap from the seat, supporting his weight as he stood. He was smaller than her, as most humans were, but heavier than he looked. Together they gathered what supplies they could carry and sealed the ship behind them. You know, Marcus said as they trudged into the desert, seeking shelter before nightfall. My orders were to gather intelligence on Veilrin military positions. Nothing in there about helping exiled commanders survive in toxic wastelands. And my culture demands I kill you on sight, Zareth replied. It seems we're both having a day of disobedience. As the twin suns set behind them, painting the desert in deeper shades of red, two unlikely companions disappeared into the wasteland together. Behind them, the crashed ship's emergency beacon blinked steadily, calling to rescue that might never come. In the distance, a sandstorm was building on the horizon. The crimson expanse was preparing to test them both. But for the first time in 5 days, Zareth didn't feel completely alone. It wasn't hope exactly, but it was something. And in this place of death, something was better than nothing. The unlikely alliance. The ancient ruins emerged from the sandstorm like the bones of some long-dead titan. Zareth half-carried, half-dragged Marcus through the narrow entrance just as the wall of crimson dust engulfed the world behind them. The human was burning with fever, his injuries infected despite her crude attempts at first aid with the supplies from his ship. Inside, the structure provided blessed relief from the toxic wind. The architecture was unlike anything from the current. Civilizations, smooth organic curves that seemed to flow into each other, covered in script that neither human nor Veilrin could read. Whoever built this place had vanished long before either of their species achieved spaceflight. Water, Marcus mumbled, his head lolling against her shoulder. Zareth lowered him carefully to the floor and opened their dwindling supplies. 3 emergency pouches remained, along with a handful of ration bars and a basic medical kit they'd salvaged. She held the water to his lips, watching him drink with small, careful sips. You should have left me, he said once he'd finished. Would have made your supplies last longer. Perhaps, Zareth agreed. But dying alone in the desert is a fate I wouldn't wish on anyone, not even an enemy. Marcus managed a weak laugh. Former enemy. I'm pretty sure my commission was revoked the moment I crashed in forbidden territory. If I ever make it back, I'll be court-martialed for losing the ship. His eyes focused on her with surprising clarity. What about you? What did the mighty Veilrin Empire cast you out for? Zareth was quiet for a long moment, treating his wounds with the last of the antiseptic. I refused to execute civilians. Your civilians. On Kafara 3. Marcus went very still. That was you? You're the commander who... He trailed off, staring at her with something like awe. 300 people. Women, children, elderly. My cousin's family was in that settlement. They told stories about the Veilrin commander who ordered her troops to stand down, who let the evacuation ships leave when she could have destroyed them. And now I am here, Zareth said bitterly, nameless, honorless, dying in the wasteland for the crime of mercy, dying for the crime of humanity, Marcus corrected softly. Though I guess that's not the right word when you're not human. They spent the night in the ruins, taking turns keeping watch though nothing could move in the sandstorm outside. When Marcus's fever broke near dawn, he was coherent enough to share more of his story. He'd been a surveyor before the war, mapping asteroid belts for mining operations. When the conflict began, his skills had been conscripted for military reconnaissance. I never wanted to be a soldier, he admitted, checking his equipment with practiced efficiency. But when your world is threatened, you do what you have to do. The Veilrin believe differently, Zareth said. We are born to be warriors. It is not a choice but a calling. From the moment we can walk, we train. From the moment we can think, we study strategy and tactics. War is not what we do, it is what we are. And yet you chose mercy. And yet I chose mercy, she agreed. Perhaps that is why I am here. A warrior who will not kill is like a blade that will not cut. Useless. Marcus pulled out a device from his pack, one she hadn't seen before. It flickered to life, displaying a holographic map. Speaking of useful, this might help. It's a geological survey scanner. Short range, but it can detect water, mineral deposits, and... He manipulated the controls. Structures. Look at this. The map showed their current location and the surrounding area in surprising detail. Scattered across the wasteland were dozens of similar ruins, and beneath them, a network of what appeared to be tunnels. The civilization that built these places, they must have had some way to survive here. If we can find their water source, we might live long enough to die of something other than thirst, Zareth finished. She studied the map intently. There, that larger structure, 7 kilometers north, the tunnel system seems to converge there. 7 kilometers. In this terrain, with my injuries, that's at least a day's travel. Maybe 2. Then we rest today. Conserve our strength. Tonight, when it's cooler, we move. As the day wore on, they talked. It was strange, Zareth reflected, how easy it was to speak with this human. Enemy or not, they shared the soldier's bond, the understanding of duty, sacrifice, and the weight of command. Marcus told her about Earth, about oceans of blue water and forests of green. She spoke of Vaelrin Prime, of crystal cities that sang in the wind and warrior academies where children learned honor before they learned to write. You know what's funny? Marcus said as they prepared to leave that evening. My grandfather was a soldier too. Fought in Earth's old wars before we made it to the stars. He used to say that the moment you start seeing your enemy as a person, with hopes and fears and families, that's when war becomes impossible. The Vaelrin have a similar saying, Zareth replied. But for us it is a warning, not wisdom. To see the enemy as anything but the enemy is the first step toward defeat. Maybe that's why you're here, Marcus suggested, shouldering his pack, with a grimace of pain. Because you took that step. They traveled through the night, navigating by the stars that wheeled overhead. The ruins they'd found on the map proved to be more extensive than either had imagined. What they'd thought was a single structure was actually the top of a massive complex, most of it buried beneath centuries of sand. There, Zareth pointed to an opening in the ground, partially excavated by wind. Airflow. I can smell moisture. They descended carefully into the darkness. Marcus's flashlight revealed walls covered in the same flowing script, and remarkably preserved murals depicting beings neither of them recognized. Tall, slender figures with elongated heads and too many limbs. Deeper they went, until the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. At its center was a pool of water fed by some underground source. It was mineral-heavy but clean, the first truly fresh water either of them had seen since entering the wasteland. We could stay here, Marcus said after they'd both drunk their fill. Set up a base, try to repair my emergency beacon, call for rescue. Zareth shook her head. Your people will arrest you for losing the ship. Mine will kill me on sight. We're both exiles now. Then what do we do? She was quiet for a moment, considering. Survive. Find a way to live in this place. Together, we might manage what neither could alone. Over the following days, they explored the underground complex, finding storage chambers with preserved foods, technology neither fully understood, and more water than they could use. Marcus's injuries healed slowly but steadily. They developed a routine, scouting during the cooler hours, maintaining their equipment, learning about each other's cultures and technologies. It was during one of these conversations that Marcus pulled out another device from his seemingly endless supply of equipment. I grabbed this from the ship's secure storage before we left. Probably shouldn't have, but he activated it, revealing another holographic display. It's military intelligence, troop movements, supply depots, strategic positions for both sides. Zareth studied the data with professional interest. This outpost here, 7th Legion Secondary Armory. That was my legion. They'll have cycled the security codes by now, but the layout. You thinking what I'm thinking? That we need supplies if we're going to survive long term? Yes, but it's suicide. Even undermanned, that outpost has automated defenses. Unless someone who knew their patterns helped navigate them, Marcus pointed out. Someone who commanded that legion. Someone who knew every security protocol, every blind spot. Zareth gave him a sharp look. You're suggesting we raid a Veilran military installation. Together, a human and an exile. I'm suggesting we survive, by any means necessary. He met her gaze steadily. Besides, there might be something there you want. Don't military installations keep trophy rooms? Places where they display captured enemy weapons and disgraced officers' effects? The words hit her like a physical blow. Star Whisper. The broken pieces of her ancestral blade would be there, displayed as a warning to others. The thought of it, her family's legacy, sitting in a case for others to gawk at, made her blood burn. Even if we could get in, she said slowly, what would be the point? The blade is broken. The crystal is dead. It can never be repaired. Marcus smiled, a strange expression on his battered face. You'd be surprised what human metallurgy can do. We've been working with alien alloys since first contact, studying them, learning from them, improving on them. He pulled out his tags, the metal discs that hung around his neck. See this? Titanium carbide composite, stronger than Veilran battle steel, more flexible than ceramic armor. We developed it by studying captured weapons and combining the best properties of both. You're saying you could repair Star Whisper? I'm saying I could try. My grandfather was a metallurgist before he was a soldier, taught me the old ways and the new. It wouldn't be the same blade, it would be something new. Something that combines both our technologies, both our strengths. Zareth was quiet for a long moment, processing this. The blade of her ancestors, reforged with human techniques. It was blasphemy. It was unthinkable. It was perfect. The outpost is 30 kilometers from here, she said finally. We'd need to move at night, avoid the patrol routes. The automated systems have a blind spot on the northwestern approach, but only for 17 seconds every hour. So we're doing this? We're surviving, she corrected. By any means necessary. As they began planning their impossible raid, something had fundamentally shifted between them. They were no longer a Veilran exile and a human pilot thrown together. By circumstance, they were allies, partners in survival. And perhaps, though neither would say it aloud, something approaching friends. The next few days were spent in preparation. They modified their equipment, studied the patrol patterns, and practiced moving together as a unit. Marcus taught Zareth about human small unit tactics and electronic warfare. She instructed him in Veilran combat forms and stealth techniques. You move like a drunk Gronik, she informed him after one particularly clumsy attempt at the shadow walk technique. I have no idea what that is, but I'm pretty sure you just insulted me, Marcus replied, picking himself up from the sand. Gronik is a large herbivore from my homeworld, noted for its extreme lack of grace and tendency to trip over its own feet. Definitely an insult then. He tried the movement again, this time managing to cross the space without disturbing a single grain of sand. Better? Marginally. Try again. As they trained together, Zareth found herself reassessing many of her assumptions about humans. She'd been taught they were weak, undisciplined, chaotic. But Marcus was none of these things. He was adaptable, determined, and surprisingly quick to learn. His smaller size, which she'd initially seen as a disadvantage, allowed him to move in ways her larger frame couldn't. His technology, which the Veilran had dismissed as inferior, proved remarkably versatile. Ready? Marcus asked on the night they'd chosen for their raid. He'd modified their clothing with thermal dampeners salvaged from his ship and cobbled together what he called a frequency scrambler from various electronic components. Zareth checked her improvised weapons, sharpened metal from the ruins, a power cell converted into a crude explosive. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. Ready. They moved out into the desert night, two shadows against the crimson sand. Ahead of them lay the outpost, and with it, danger, opportunity, and perhaps a chance at something neither had thought possible in this wasteland. As they crept toward the perimeter, Marcus whispered, "You know where I come from, we have a saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend." The Velren have a different saying, Zareth replied. Trust is the first casualty of war. Good thing we're not at war anymore then. He squeezed her shoulder briefly, a gesture of support that felt surprisingly natural. Just 2 exiles against the universe. Just 2 exiles, she agreed, and for the first time since her disgrace the words didn't taste bitter. The outpost loomed before them, its walls stark against the night sky. Somewhere inside lay the pieces of Star Whisper, the symbol of everything she had lost. But as she glanced at Marcus, his face set with determination as he worked to disable the first sensor, she realized she might have found something else entirely. In the wasteland, where death was the only certainty, they had found trust. Where isolation was the punishment, they had found partnership. Where honor had been stripped away, they had found a different kind of strength. The raid would be dangerous. Success was far from guaranteed. But as they slipped through the shadows toward their objective, Zareth felt something she hadn't experienced since her exile. Hope. Not for redemption. Not for return. But for something new. Something forged in the crucible of survival and the unlikely bond between former enemies. The night was young, and their greatest challenge lay ahead. But they would face it together. The Blade Reborn. Abandoned mining station materialized out of the pre-dawn darkness like a ghost of industry past. Zareth and Marcus approached cautiously, their successful raid on the Velren outpost 12 hours behind them, but still singing in their blood. The satchel across Zareth's back held the broken pieces of Star Whisper, recovered from the trophy, room along with enough supplies to last them weeks. This should work, Marcus said, studying the structure through his binoculars. Automated facilities like this were built to last. If the power cells are still functional, we'll have everything. They'd discovered the mining station's location in the outpost's database, a relic from before the war, when this region of space had been neutral territory. The facility had processed rare minerals from the desert, including the exotic alloys, used in Velren bladesmithing. Inside, emergency lighting flickered to life as they entered. The main processing floor stretched out before them, dominated by massive industrial equipment covered in decades of dust. Marcus immediately began examining the machinery, his excitement palpable. This is perfect. Molecular forge, precision, etching tools, even a gravitational alignment chamber. Your ancestors knew their metallurgy. Zareth carefully unwrapped the pieces of Star Whisper, laying them on a cleared workbench. The broken blade seemed to mock her. 3 jagged pieces of what had once been whole, the crystal pommel dark and cracked. Can you truly repair this? Marcus picked up the largest fragment, examining the break pattern with a practiced eye. Not repair, reforge, make something new. He reached into his pack and withdrew a small metal case. Remember I mentioned my grandfather was a metallurgist. He gave me this before I left Earth. Inside the case was an ingot of strange metal, iridescent and seeming to shift between states as the light hit it. Programmable matter, Earth's latest breakthrough. It can bond at the molecular level with almost any alloy, taking on the properties of what it joins while adding its own strength. Alien technology joined with human innovation, Zareth mused. My ancestors would be horrified. But you're not, she considered this. No, I'm not. The old ways led me here to exile and disgrace. Perhaps new ways are what's needed. They spent hours preparing. Marcus recalibrated the forge systems, while Zareth processed raw materials from the station's stores. As they worked, he explained the theory behind the reforging. Traditional metallurgy is about heating and hammering, forcing metal into new shapes. But at the quantum level, we're talking about convincing atoms to dance differently. Your blade's crystal matrix is actually perfect for this. It already exists partially outside normal spacetime. Zareth watched him work, fascinated by the blend of advanced science and ancient craft. You speak of metal like it's alive, isn't it? Every atom vibrating with energy, every molecular bond a tiny negotiation between forces. Your people sing to your blades during forging, right? It's not so different. You're harmonizing with the metal's frequency. When everything was ready, they positioned the broken pieces in the forge's containment field. Marcus added the programmable matter at key points, then began the delicate process of molecular manipulation. "I need you to sing," he said suddenly. "The traditional forging songs. The metal needs to remember what it was." Zareth hesitated. "I'm nameless. I have no right to sing the sacred songs." "Then sing something else. Something true. The metal doesn't care about your status, it cares about your intent." After a moment, Zareth began to hum, not the traditional war hymns or forging chants, but something older. A lullaby her blood mother had sung about stars being born in the void and finding their light. As she sang, Marcus worked the controls, his movements taking on an almost meditative rhythm. The broken pieces began to glow, not with simple heat but with an inner light that seemed to come from between the atoms themselves. The programmable matter flowed like liquid starlight, finding the breaks and sealing them with bonds stronger than the original. "Now comes the hard part," Marcus said, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chamber's coolness. "The crystal. It's not just decoration, is it? It's the blade's heart. Its power source. It channels the wielder's life force," Zareth confirmed. "Amplifies it, but it's dead. The breaking severed its connection to the bloodline." Marcus smiled. "Good thing I brought a spare power source then." He pulled out another component from his seemingly endless supply of salvaged tech. "Quantum processor from my ship's navigation system, still linked to Earth's zero-point energy network. If I can integrate it with your crystal matrix." "You're going to give my blade human technology as its heart?" "Technically, I'm creating a hybrid system that draws power from both quantum entanglement and life force resonance. But yes, the next phase was even more delicate." Marcus carefully removed the cracked crystal from the pommel, then began the intricate process of fusing it with the quantum processor. Zareth watched, hardly daring to breathe, as human and Vaelrin technology merged at the subatomic level. "Sing. Again," Marcus commanded, his hands steady despite the complexity of the work. "It needs to know who it belongs to." This time Zareth sang of her journey, of honor lost and found in new forms, of an enemy who became an ally, of survival in the wasteland and the strength found in letting go of old hatreds. Her voice grew stronger as the crystal began to pulse with renewed life, not the pure violet of its original form, but a swirling mix of purple and electric blue. Hours passed. The forge hummed with energy as metal flowed and reformed. Marcus's modifications added new patterns to the blade, circuit-like tracings that seemed to move beneath the surface, responding to Zareth's proximity. The hilt reformed around the hybrid crystal, the wrapping now a blend of traditional Vaelrin leather and carbon fiber from Marcus's flight suit. Finally, as the first sun began to peek through the station's windows, Marcus powered down the forge. In the containment field lay a sword unlike anything either culture had produced. The blade maintained Star Whisper's distinctive curve, but with an edge that seemed to exist partially in another dimension, occasionally flickering with quantum uncertainty. The metal itself was no longer uniform silver, but showed flowing patterns, where human and Vaelrin alloys had merged like oil on water but solid and permanent. "It's done," Marcus said, exhaustion clear in his voice. "But I should warn you, I have no idea what we've created. The quantum entanglement alone makes it theoretically impossible, but—" Zareth reached out, her hand hovering over the reformed blade. She could feel it calling to her, not just the familiar resonance of her ancestral weapon, but something new, something that spoke of possibility rather than tradition. She grasped the hilt. The moment her fingers closed around the grip, the blade blazed to life. Energy coursed through the weapon and into her, but it wasn't the pure Vaelrin battle fury she expected. Instead, she felt connection to Marcus, standing beside her, to the quantum field that linked his technology to distant Earth, to the potential futures spreading out before them like branches of light. "How does it feel?" Marcus asked softly. "Different," Zareth admitted, moving through a basic form. The blade's weight was perfect, its balance flawless. But there was something else. With each movement, the air seemed to ripple around the edge. It's not just a weapon anymore, it's a bridge, Marcus finished. Between worlds, between peoples, between what was and what could be. Zareth completed the form and lowered the blade, studying its transformed surface. My people will never accept this. A blade polluted by human technology, wielded by an exile. And your people will probably court-martial me for sharing classified tech with the enemy, Marcus laughed. Guess that makes us even. Then what do we do now? Marcus looked around the mining station, then back at her. Whatever we want. We're both exiles, but we're also both free. Free from the expectations of our people. Free from the war. Free to find our own path. Zareth sheathed the reborn sword, feeling its weight settle against her hip. It was different from before, not the weight of tradition and expectation, but of possibility. The wasteland is vast. There must be others out here, exiles, refugees, those who don't fit the neat categories of our war. A third option, Marcus mused. Neither human nor Velryn, but something new.